A very good day to all students. I'm Madam Tan Siu Jin from SMK Sibujaya. My topics today are concept of movement of substances across a membrane and how to explain genetic diagram. Before we start the lesson, let's us think about this question first. Number 1. What are the substances required by cells and the waste product eliminated from cells? Number 2. How do these substances move in and out of cells? Number 3. Why some of the substances require energy to move in and out of cells, but some don't? Number 4. Explain why water can diffuse across plasma membrane without the help of carrier protein, but glucose needs a carrier protein. Number 5. How neurons maintain high concentration of potassium ions within the cell, while sodium ions are maintained at high concentrations outside of the cells. Number 6. Starch, lactose, and sucrose are sources of carbohydrate, which provide energy, but none of these can be absorbed in small intestine. Explain why. Number 7. How glucose, galactose, and fructose are absorbed in small intestine. Number 8. Are glucose, galactose, and fructose absorbed completely in the small intestine? Explain. Number 9. How glucose diffuse into the body cell. Last one. How to explain genetic diagram in sentences. What are the substances required by cells and the waste product eliminated from cells? Cells need oxygen, glucose for respiration, amino acid for growth, making enzymes and hormones, and the cell also need mineral salt and other nutrients to stay healthy. And the waste product, for example, carbon dioxide, urea, and other nitrogenous waste. This is the waste product from respiration and other metabolism. These waste products are toxic to the cell and need to be eliminated from the cell. So, how do these substances move in and out of the cell? There are two main types of movement for these substances: passive transport and active transport. The main difference between them is the movement of molecules or ions for passive transport are down the concentration gradient, while for the active transport, the movement of molecules or ions are against the concentration gradient. For passive transport, just like playing the slide, we do not require energy to slide down. But if we want to climb up the slide, we need energy. For example, if someone opens a bottle of perfume, then the perfume particles will diffuse out from high concentration to an area of low concentration. It just happens naturally and do not require energy. But if you want all the perfume particles diffuse back and accumulate again in the bottle, then you must need energy. You cannot say, "Oh, perfume, please come back. Don't go away." No matter how many times you ask for the perfume particles to come back and accumulate in the perfume bottle, it won't. Next, the example of passive transport is simple diffusion, osmosis, and facilitated diffusion. For the facilitated diffusion, it's the movement of the molecules or ions which cannot diffuse through the phospholipid bilayer. So it needs the help of the channel protein and carrier protein to cross the plasma membrane. And for the simple diffusion and osmosis is for the substances which can diffuse in and out of the cell just through the phospholipid bilayer. Then, what's the differences between simple diffusion and osmosis? Simple diffusion is the movement of molecules or ions from high concentration to an area of low concentration. This may occur with or without the presence of plasma membrane. And osmosis actually is a special term only for water. So it is the movement of the water from high water potential to an area of low water potential. And this must occur with the presence of the plasma membrane. You cannot take a mineral water bottle and shake it and then tell your teachers, this is the example of osmosis. Your teacher will be offended. Example for active transport: sodium-potassium pump, proton pump. It requires energy to pump the substances into or out from the cells. Of course, it cannot just pump through the phospholipid bilayer, so it needs carrier protein. But remember, this carrier protein is different for the carrier protein in the passive transport. Actually, there are so many different types of carrier protein found on the plasma membrane. For passive transport, the diffusion of the substances will achieve dynamic equilibrium. But this doesn't mean that all substances will stop moving once they achieve the equilibrium. They weren't going to say, "Hi, everybody, stop moving now. We already achieved dynamic equilibrium, so cannot move anymore." Actually, they still move randomly, just the movement no longer causes a change in concentration. But why the oxygen can continuously diffuse into the cell seems like never achieve the dynamic equilibrium? So, the answer is, inside the cell, the oxygen concentration will be always lower than the oxygen concentration outside the cell. This is because oxygen in the cell will be used out for the respiration. For active transport, only living cell can do it, because only living cell can carry out respiration to generate ATP for the active transport. So, it must have some purpose also for the living cell. Either one, to accumulate the substances in the cell, or to eliminate the substances out from the cell. Explain why water can diffuse across plasma membrane without the help of carrier protein, but glucose needs a carrier protein. This is because of the chemical and structural nature of the phospholipid bilayer, where the interior parts of the plasma membrane are hydrophobic. So, only lipid-soluble molecules and very small molecules are able to diffuse through phospholipid bilayer. Example of the lipid-soluble molecules such as fatty acids, glycerol, hydrocarbon, ethanol, fat-soluble vitamins, and steroids. And for the very small molecules like the water, oxygen, and carbon dioxide. So, why water can diffuse across plasma membrane without the help of carrier protein? It is because water is very small molecules. And why glucose cannot diffuse through phospholipid bilayer? This is because glucose is larger polar molecule. The hydrophobic interior of the plasma membrane will repel the movement of the glucose. If the glucose comes to the phospholipid bilayer and want to move across the phospholipid bilayer, then the hydrophobic tail will say, "You are bipolar, hydrophilic, and I am hydrophobic. I won't let you go." So how? All these glucose, amino acid, nucleic acid, charged atoms like the hydrogen ions, sodium ions, all are needed by the cells. So how plasma membrane transport all these molecules? Only through the help of carrier protein or channel protein. Next, how neurons maintain high concentration of potassium ions within the cell, while sodium ions are maintained at high concentration outside of the cell. The answer, of course, is active transport. The example of the active transport here is sodium-potassium pump. 3 sodium ions will be pumped out, and 2 sodium ions will be pumped in. And this movement is against the concentration gradient and require energy. This will result in accumulation of potassium ion in the cell and elimination of sodium ions from the cell. So that's why the sodium ions concentration are maintained at high concentration outside of the cell. Because of active transport require energy, and the energy is generated through respiration. So any factors that can reduce the respiration will reduce active transport. For example, lower temperature, lack of oxygen, and respiratory inhibitors. Starch, lactose, and sucrose are sources of carbohydrate, which provide energy, but none of these can be absorbed in small intestine. Explain why. Starch is polysaccharide. Lactose and sucrose are disaccharide. They are too large to pass through the plasma membrane. You see the diagram of the starch. Starch is made of a long chain of glucose, so it is a weak molecule. Even the villus burst, starch also cannot get into the blood capillary. And the other reason is there is no carrier protein for starch, lactose, and sucrose. So digestion is important to hydrolyze starch, lactose, and sucrose into the smallest molecules, which are glucose, galactose, and fructose. How glucose, galactose, and fructose are absorbed in small intestine? Are glucose, galactose, and fructose absorbed completely in the small intestine? Explained. Glucose and galactose are absorbed in small intestine through active transport, and fructose is absorbed through facilitated diffusion. All glucose and galactose are absorbed completely in the small intestine because active transport able to transport substances against the concentration gradient by using energy. So, not all fructose can be absorbed in the small intestine because facilitated diffusion occurs only until equilibrium is achieved. So the absorption of the fructose is much slower and quantitatively limited. For the reabsorption in the proximal convolute tubule, 100% of glucose and amino acid is reabsorbed by active transport. So, for the diabetes mellitus, why the glucose is excreted in urine? It is because the blood glucose level for the diabetic patient, exceeds the maximum which the kidneys can reabsorb. How glucose diffuse into the body cell? Explained. Glucose diffuse into the body cell just through facilitated diffusion. It diffuses down the concentration gradient by using carrier protein, and no energy is required. So, it is important to maintain the normal blood glucose level so that the glucose concentration in the blood is higher than in the body cell. So the glucose can just diffuse into the body cell by using facilitated diffusion, and it do not need the active transport. And this is energy saving also actually. Okay, now let us discuss some questions. Step 2, characteristic of vitamin A. So look at the diagram. Where is vitamin A? And based on the diagram, we can see that vitamin A can just diffuse through the phospholipid bilayer. What is the characteristic of the substances that can just diffuse through the phospholipid bilayer? The answer is lipid soluble, non-polar, and small size. Next question, based on the same diagram, explain the movement of vitamin A into the body cell. Since we know already vitamin A are lipid-soluble vitamins, and we know that the vitamins can diffuse through the phospholipid bilayer. So we need to explain this type of movement. So the answer is vitamin A diffuse through phospholipid bilayer. Just explain the diagram, and then we'll explain more about this simple diffusion. So this movement is from high concentration to a region of lower concentration, and it does not require energy. Next, the presence of mercury inhibits the respiration of the body cell. Explain the effect on the transport of sodium ions across the plasma membrane. So the question already gives us the information. Inhibit respiration. So any more energy produced, then the transport of sodium still can occur. So refer to the diagram. We can see that transport of sodium ion is active or passive, need energy or not. So refer to the diagram. We can see that it uses ADP. So using ADP, that's mean active transport. And active transport need energy. So answer the question. The transport of the sodium ions or the active transport does not occur. Why? is because no energy produced already and no ATP bind to the carrier protein. So the carrier protein does not change the cell. So active transport cannot occur. Next topic, how to explain genetic diagram in synthesis. Actually, we just explain according to the genetic diagram and use the keyword in genetic diagram. Let us learn it through the questions. Diagram 3.2 shows a cross between offspring R and offspring S. R is heterozygous for fur color. Refer to the key here. Big B is the allele for black color, and the small b is the allele for white color. And since the question already mentioned R is heterozygous, so we know that the genotype for rabbit R is big B and small b. Question number 1. What are the possible genotype of S? So by looking at the offspring, R is black color. So it is impossible for the genotype for S will be small b and small b, because this will have the percentage to produce offspring with white fur color. So the possible genotype of S, it can be big B, or big B, small b. Next question. Explain the inheritance of fur color by rabbit V. So this means that the question wants you to explain why rabbit V, the fur color is black. So for this question, you might find it to be easy to explain it by just drawing or writing the genetic diagram. But now the question wants you to explain it in sentences. Writing genetic diagram is easy, but you have to make sure all the data here must be correct. But how to explain in sentences? Actually, just refer to the info in the genetic diagram and use the words in the genetic diagram. So, first we explain about the parental phenotype. So, phenotype of parent R and S are black. Then, genotype for the parent R is big B and small b. Genotype for parent S is big B and big B. Next, we explain the meiosis. This arrow represents gamete formation, which is meiosis. So we just write during meiosis, the parent R, it will produce the gamete with allele big B or allele small b. While for the other parents, only produce gamete with allele big B only. Then, during fertilization, offspring receive one dominant allele, big B. It might be received big B, or it might be received small b, gamete with allele small b. And it will receive the other allele from parent S, but its dominant one. So the genotype of the offspring is big B, or the big B and small b. The phenotype of offspring is black because dominant allele B express out its trait. Okay, let's come back to the questions. Explain the inheritance of fur color by rabbit V by using synthesis. So we just explained meiosis. The R will produce the gamete with the allele B or the allele small b, and the other parent S will produce gamete with allele big B only. And then during fertilization, offspring V will receive one dominant allele big B from S and one dominant allele big B, or might be recessive allele small b from S. but the genotype will be having at least one dominant allele. So the phenotype of offspring is black because the dominant allele bit B will express out its trait. Another genetic diagram which involves dihybrid cross. So this is the genetic diagram. And the key bit R is the allele for brown seed. Small r, which is recessive, for wrinkled seed. And big Y for yellow seed. Small y for green seed. Explain how offspring L inherit the brown and yellow seed trait. The answer here, the offspring L receive RY from J, and then big R and a small y from K, and the genotype of L is big R, big Y, small y. This answer is wrong because we need to explain on the two characteristics separately. So how to explain it? Again, we explain the genetic diagram in sentences. We need to explain how offspring L inherit the brown and yellow seed trait. So we need to explain these two characteristics separately, which is one is about the seed shade and the other one is about the seed color. So during fertilization, offspring L it receives R. So this R is for the characteristic for the shade of the seed. So it receives one R from J and the other R from K. For the other characteristic, which is the color of the seed, it receives allele Y from J and the small y, the allele small y from K. Then why it is yellow and brown? Because dominant allele Y and dominant allele R will express out its trait. So this is the answer for this question. Next questions. Diagram 5.3 shows another example of a genetic cross. State the differences between these genetic cross in diagram 5.3 with the cross shown in diagram 5.1. So diagram 5.3, very obviously it is monohybrid cross. And in diagram 5.1, it is dihybrid cross. What is the differences between them? Look at the answer here. The answer is wrong. Only correct for the dihybrid cross, monohybrid cross, and the all other answers are wrong. Very obviously, the student cannot understand the term like the gene, allele, characteristic, and the trait. So what is the differences between the gene and the allele, the characteristic, and the trait? One gene controls only one characteristic. The example of the characteristic here is height. And the height can be assisted in two, that is tall and short. So for these two, we call it trait. We cannot say characteristic for tall, characteristic for short. It seems like two characteristics already. And also for the gene, one gene, one characteristic. And we cannot say also one gene for tall, another gene for short. This will be things like there are two genes. If there is two genes, there will be control two characteristics. So we have another term, alleles. So alleles is the different form of the same gene. This means this gene can be existed in two forms. So we have one pair of alleles. One allele for the tall trait, the other allele for the short trait. And for the dihybrid cross, it involves two genes. So two genes will be control two characteristics. And the example here can be seed color, and the other characteristic, seed shape. And for the seed color, it can be existed in two forms. It can be yellow, it can be green. And for the shape of the seed, it can be round, it can be wrinkled. So these are all traits. So two pairs of alleles. So for one gene existed in two forms, so one pairs of allele. One allele for yellow, one allele for green. For another gene also existed in two forms, there is two alleles. So one for the round trait and one for the wrinkle trait. Then, what is the correct answer to show the differences between the dihybrid cross and the monohybrid cross? So first one, okay, diagram 5.1 involve dihybrid cross, and diagram 5.3 monohybrid cross. So dihybrid cross involve two genes. So of course there will be two pairs of alleles. And monohybrid cross, only one gene and one pair of allele. So two genes control two characteristics. One gene control one characteristic. And the characteristic in the diagram 5.1 is the shape of the seed and the color of the seed. And for the characteristic in diagram 5.3 is about the height. And for the traits, the seed shape can be round, can be wrinkled, and for the color, it can be yellow, it can be green. And for the height, the trait can be tall and can be short. Diagram 5.1 dihybrid cross so involve Mendel second law. And for diagram 5.3, it involves Mendel first law. Now is the exercise time for all of you. First questions. Diagram 1.3 shows the transport of glucose from proximal convolute tubule into the blood capillary. Explain what happened to the transport of glucose if the structure X is absent. Next questions. Diagram shows the crossbreeding between two mice. Explain why all the offspring have black fur. So look at the diagram. The parents here, homozygous, black fur. And the other parent, homozygous, white fur. But all the offspring has black fur. Explain the questions. Now we come to the end of our sessions. Thank you, everyone.
Hi, I'm Doreen. I'm going to share with you the assessment format of biology paper 2 and some sample questions. Let's go.
Assessment format of Biology Paper 2. Biology Paper 2 is a written paper. The questions will be a combination of structure, limited response, and open response. Section A consists of 8 structure questions. Total marks in this section is 60 marks. Answer all questions in this section. Section B consists of 2 essay questions. Answer any one questions from this section. Total marks in this section is 20 marks. Section C consists of 1 essay questions only. Answer 1 question from this section. Total marks in this section is 20 marks. Then we go to construct requirement in paper 2. Remembering 15 marks, understanding 15 marks, applying 35 marks, analyzing 20 marks, evaluating or creating 15 marks. Level of difficulty easy to medium to hard will be 5 to 3 to 2. Total marks for this paper 100 marks. Time 2 hours and 30 minutes. Section A paper 2 consists of 8 structure questions. Question 1 and question 2 6 marks each. Question 3 and question 4 7 marks each. Question 5 and question 6 8 marks each. Question 7 and question 8 9 marks each. Total marks in this section is 60 marks. Information for students in Biology Paper 2, Section A. Section A consists of 8 questions compulsory for students to answer. Each question consists of several parts, and it is based on a stimulus such as a diagram, table, or graph. The questions are normally structured from easy to difficult. The questions test remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, or creating. Read all the questions carefully to make sure you are understanding and interpreting them correctly. Answers should be concise and brief. The lines provided for answers and the marks allocated can be used to determine the number of facts and the length of the answers required for each question. Diagrams or graphs drawn using pencil should be clearly labeled. For questions involving calculation, the working should be shown and the answer with units stated. Highlight the important keywords used in the question in order to determine the correct approach answering the question. We look at several examples of the keywords used in the question. Name. Example of question, name P and Q. This is 2 marks question. To answer this question, you need to give the name to structure P and Q, and the spelling must be correct. We look at the sample answer. Structure P is phospholipid, Q is pore protein or channel protein. If you really cannot spell the word channel protein correctly, try to spell the word to the nearest pronunciation with no other meaning. I give you one example. What does it mean with no other meaning? We look at this example. Okay. Channel protein. So this is the incorrect spelling with other meaning. And the pronunciation of channel here actually is Chanel. Okay, this is refers to another meaning, which is luxury fashion house. So this is incorrect answer. Next keywords, state. Example of question. State 3 importances of preserving the food. This is 3 marks question. To answer this question, you need to give 3 facts without any explanation. We look at the sample answer. Number 1, avoid wastage. Number 2, prevent food spoilage. Number 3, prevent bacterial growth. What about if you state more than 3 answers? Means you state 2 more answers after number 3. In this condition, only the first 3 answers will be marked. Explain why. Explain why Benedict's test gives a negative result on sucrose. This is 3 marks question. To answer this question, you need to give explanation on facts and state the reason. Okay, we look at Benedict test. Think about the purpose to carry out Benedict test. Benedict test is the test to test the presence of reducing sugar. So this question mentioned on the result on sucrose is negative, which means that sucrose is non-reducing sugar. So this is the facts. Reason, reduction does not occur. Another reason is copper 2 sulfate cannot be reduced to copper 1 oxide in Benedict solution, which means copper 2 positive cannot be reduced to copper 1 positive in Benedict solution. Next example. Explain how. We look at the question first. Hot water from a factory is released into the river. Diagram below shows the effect of temperature on the concentration of dissolved oxygen in the river. Explain how this situation causes the death of fish in the river. 2 marks. Explain how means give explanation on the facts and explain how this situation happened. So to answer or to explain how this situation happened, you need to analyze the information from the graph. We look at the graph first. X-axis of this graph shows temperature. Y-axis shows concentration of dissolved oxygen. Then, relate the effects of hot water from the factory which is released into the river with the situation above. Hot water from the factory which is released into the river cause the water temperature to increase. So this leads to thermal pollution. Then, when the temperature of the river water increases, the concentration of the oxygen in the water decreases, which means there will be less amount of oxygen in the water. So at the same time, the river water with high temperature denature the respiratory enzyme of the fish. The amount of oxygen in the river water getting less, and this reduces the rate of respiration. So a lot of fish die, and the bacteria will be carried out the decomposition actively and use up the dissolved oxygen. So this causes the BOD value to increase. Next example, state the differences. We look at the question first. State two differences of transport process which occur at Q and R. 2 marks. To answer this question, you need to give the differences without any explanation, which means you need to state two differences only. No need to explain the differences between these two types of transport proteins. We look at the sample answer. Number 1, Q does not change in shape, whereas R change in shape. 1 mark. Answer number 2, transport process occurs at Q, does not need energy, whereas transport process occurs at R, needs energy. 1 mark. When you state the differences between the processes occur at Q and R, you must compare the differences from the same aspects. We look at the sample answer number 1. Sample answer number 1 is the comparison from the aspect change in shape between these two types of transport proteins. Answer number 2 is the comparison from the aspect using energy. Or, to answer this question, you can use tabulating form, that is constructing a table to list the differences side by side. Next example, with the keywords discussed. Discuss the consequences of the kidney failure. 2 marks. To answer this question, you need to tell the story on the implication of the kidney failure, which means you need to state the negative answers, which involve the word like cannot, cannot, cannot in storytelling. So you need to tell the story when kidney cannot be function anymore, which means kidney cannot carry out the function as excretory organ. Urea cannot be excreted. Toxin will be accumulated in the body. Then another functions of kidney which cannot be carried out due to the kidney failure occur will be osmoregulatory organ. So kidney cannot function as osmoregulatory organ. The water and the salt balance cannot be maintained. So this causes edema, and the patient needs to undergo hemodialysis and kidney transplant. So the question here is 2 marks, but you need to tell a lot of story on the consequences. Next example, the keywords how many. How many population of garden snails in the vegetable farm? 1 mark. Which means that when you state the answer, you need to state a quantity. No need to show the calculation. So 1 mark is given for the answer, 200 snails. We look at the next example. Table below shows the type of fruit juice and the volume of the fruit juice to decolorize 1 cm³ DCPIP solution. Calculate the percentage of vitamin C in lime juice. The keywords used in this question is calculate. 2 marks. To answer this question, the word calculate here means both states and answer needed. Answer with unit stated. We go to sample answer. Percentage of vitamin C in the lime juice equals to volume of the ascorbic acid used divided by volume of the lime juice used to decolorize DCPIP solution. Multiply with 0.1%. So this working step will be given 1 mark, and the answer 0.13% will be given 1 mark. Next example. Tick. In the table below, tick the correct examples of the simple diffusion. 2 marks. Means you need to put 2 ticks in the column to mark the correct answers. When you answer this question, must use the symbol given. The symbol given in this question is in this way, tick, which means when you answer the question, you cannot use other symbol such as circle or put the cross. Okay, must use tick only to mark the correct answer. We look at another case. Tick the correct examples of the simple diffusion. 2 marks. Which means that you need to put 2 ticks as the correct examples of the simple diffusion in this column. But you tick all the examples of the simple diffusion as stated in this table. Which means that your marks will be rounded down to 1 mark only, due to wrong cancel right is applied here. This is incorrect answer. So your marks will be rounded down to 1 only. Next question. Draw the structure of a nucleotide. 2 marks. The keywords used in this question is draw, which means you need to draw and label the structure of a nucleotide. This is the answer. Use a pencil to draw the structure without broken line. And the marking criteria in this question: drawing 1 mark, labeling 1 mark. The next example of question with the keywords match. Match the food to the suitable method of preservation. 2 marks. The word match in this question means draw a line or draw arrow to link the correct answer. As long as you are able to match the type of food to the correct preserving method, so you will be given 1 mark for the correct answer. Next sample question with the keywords arrange. Arrange the following structures to show the first 3 levels of cell organization. 1 mark. To state the answer for the first 3 levels of cell organization means you need to write the answers in a correct sequence, which is in ascending order, from organelle R to organelle S to tissue T. So you can use arrow to show the answer in ascending order from the organelle R to X to tissue T. Or you can use comma to state the answers in correct sequence. The next session will be the practice question on certain subtopic. Review of lactic acid fermentation. When carrying out vigorous activity, the blood might not be able to supply the muscles with enough oxygen. The muscles are in the state of oxygen deficiency. So lactic acid fermentation occurs because the cells do not have enough oxygen to carry out aerobic respiration. Lactic acids produce accumulation of high concentration of lactic acid makes the muscle cramps and fatigue. After vigorous activity, more oxygen is inhaled through deep and fast breathing to break down the lactic acids that has built out and to pair off oxygen debt. Practice question number 1. Diagram below shows two individuals, P and Q, in two different situations. P is listening to music and reading books. Q is running in a 200-meter sprint event. State the type of respiration of individual P and Q. This is remembering question, 2 marks. Keywords used in this question is state. So you just need to state the types of respiration. The answer is aerobic respiration for individual P. 1 mark. Then individual Q, lactic acid fermentation. 1 mark. Question B. Compare the types of respiration that occur in P and Q. Keywords, compare. This is analyzing question, 2 marks. The word compare here refers to state the similarity and difference. 2 marks. 1 mark will be given for similarity, another 1 mark for difference. The sample answers will be, for the similarity, both are cellular respiration. Glucose is the main substrate. Energy is produced. So just take one similarity to get 1 mark. For the differences, you may use tabulating form. So construct a table to list the differences side by side. We look at the first answer. The first answer is the comparison between the presence of oxygen. Respiration in P occurs in the presence of oxygen, whereas respiration in Q occurs in the absence of oxygen. Glucose is completely broken down into carbon dioxide and water with the release of energy, whereas glucose is partially broken down into lactic acid with the release of energy. So this answer is the comparison between the types of respiration in P and Q from the aspects broken down of glucose. Then we go to difference number 3. A large amount of energy is released or produces 38 ATP molecules, whereas respiration in Q, a small amount of energy is released or produces 2 ATP molecules. So just need to state one difference and one similarity to get 2 marks. Question C. The following are the steps on how to prevent the formation of lactic acid accumulation in the muscles. Step 1. Warm and stretch muscles sufficiently before and after exercise. Step 2. Increase the intake of bananas and legumes in the diet. In your opinion, which step is important to prevent the formation of lactic acid accumulation in the muscles? Explain why. The keywords used in this question is explain why. This is application question, 3 marks. We look at the sample answer. If you think that step 1 is very important, so answer 1, step 1, because you need to choose among these 2 steps which one is more important. Then explanation, because of the keywords used in this question is explain why. So here will be the explanation why step number 1 is very important. So we look at these 3 explanations. It helps to relieve muscle tension, warm up. It improves blood circulation, warm up. Body cells can get more oxygen faster to remove the lactic acids, warm up. So maximum 3 marks. If you think that step number 2 is important, so the answers for the step number 2 will be given 1 mark. Then the explanation for the reason will be these 2. We look at explanation 1 for the facts. Step 2, to increase the intake of magnesium. Step 2, increase the intake of banana and legumes in the diet. These 2 types of food are the example of food source rich in magnesium, which means step number 2 is the step to increase the intake of magnesium. Then reason number 2, high levels of magnesium can prevent the body from exhausting its energy quicker. So this is how to get 3 marks for this question. Another 2 practice questions for you to answer and evaluate yourself in learning lactic acid fermentation. Question 1. Explain why the amount of lactic acid increases during exercise period. This is understanding question, 3 marks. The keywords used in this question is explain why. Question 2. Jack is running 12 laps around his school field. Explain how eating starchy food will help him to keep running. This is application question, 3 marks. The keywords used in this question is explain how. Do these 2 practice questions and discuss the answers with your biology teacher. Hormonal control and negative feedback. Endocrine system is made up of glands that secrete hormone directly into the bloodstream. The blood transports hormone to target organ. Pituitary gland is the master gland that secretes several hormones, which some of these hormones stimulate other glands. For example, thyroid stimulating hormone, TSH, stimulates thyroid gland to secrete tyrosine. Tyrosine increases metabolic rate, body temperature, and regulates growth and development. Tyrosine is controlled by negative feedback. Question 2. Hormones are produced by endocrine glands and transported by the blood to the target organs. A. Name the gland that secretes TSH. This is remembering question, 1 mark. The keywords used in this question is name. So you just need to state the name of the gland which is involved in secretions of TSH. So the answer for this question is pituitary gland, 1 mark. Question B. Explain how negative feedback helps to keep the level of tyrosine in the body at constant level. This is understanding question, 3 marks. The keywords used in this question is explain how, and the hormone involved is tyrosine. You may use this diagram to explain how negative feedback mechanism is carried out to keep the level of tyrosine at constant level, which means that you can refer to this diagram at here. So negative feedback mechanism will be carried out when the tyrosine level increase. We look at the sample answer. When tyrosine level increases, negative feedback mechanism is carried out, which inhibits the secretion of TSH from the pituitary gland. So this stops the releasing of tyrosine from the thyroid gland. When the tyrosine level drops, the secretion of TSH is no longer inhibited. This stimulates the releasing of tyrosine from the thyroid gland, and the level of tyrosine rises and back to normal value. So this is how the negative feedback mechanism carried out to regulate the tyrosine at constant level. Question C. On the spot day, the level of ADH in an athlete's blood is increased with the physical activity. Explain why this occurs. This is application question, 3 marks. The keywords used in this question is explain why. Then we need to look at another information given in this question, physical activity. Physical activity refers to the vigorous activity carried out by the athlete on the sport day. So due to this vigorous activity, the athletes experience excessive loss of water from the body in the sweat. So you need to explain further what would be the regulation carried out when the osmotic pressure of these athletes increase due to excessive loss of water. We look at the sample answer. A lot of water lost from the athlete's body in sweat. This is the answers refers to the vigorous activity mentioned in this question. So a loss of water lost from the athlete's body, this increase the blood osmotic pressure. Regulation on the increase of the blood osmotic pressure need to be carried out. So the regulation will be in this way. More ADH is secreted. So the distal convoluted tubule and the collecting duct will be more permeable to water. Then more water will be reabsorbed into the blood from the kidney's tubule. So this is about the osmoregulation when the blood osmotic pressure increase. Recap of question C. Regulation of water loss and drink too little water. When loss of water due to vigorous activity, blood osmotic pressure increases above the normal range. Osmoreceptor cells in hypothalamus detect the increases in blood osmotic pressure. Osmoreceptor cells stimulate pituitary gland to secrete more ADH into blood. More ADH is secreted to increase the permeability of distal convoluted tubule and collecting duct. More water is reabsorbed from the filtrate into the blood capillaries. The urine produced is concentrated and low in volume. Blood osmotic pressure decreases back to the normal range. Attention to students. Number 1. Must mention the quantity of ADH secreted in osmoregulation. For example, when blood osmotic pressure increases above the normal range, ADH is secreted. This is incorrect answer. The correct answer should be when blood osmotic pressure increases above the normal range, more ADH is secreted. The word more must be mentioned in this answer. This is because ADH is secreted when blood osmotic pressure increases and also when blood osmotic pressure decreases. The difference will be the quantity of ADH secreted. Either is more or less. Number 2. Use correct term or word. For example, more water is absorbed. The word absorbed is incorrect. So the correct word should be reabsorbed, which means more water is reabsorbed when blood osmotic pressure increases above the normal range. Two practice questions for you to answer and evaluate yourself in learning this subtopic. Question 1. During exercise period, the level of glucagon in a person's blood increases with the physical activity. Explain why this occurs. This is application question, 3 marks. Question 2. Explain why a person with diabetes insipidus needs to drink more water than a normal person. This is application question, 3 marks. Do these two practice questions and discuss the answers with your biology teacher.
That's all for today. Hopefully you enjoyed this video and learned something. Bye bye.